This week on Hacking TV, the coming world of cable TV over the internet hits the big time as AT&T introduces DirecTV Now.
It's a dramatic announcement if you ignore the technical difficulties and the complaints by the FCC.
And what if everybody cancels their cable and goes over the top at the same time? Well, a top analyst says that would only cost Comcast $5.50 a month per customer of defection, which is not that much.
Meanwhile, CNN buys a social network app and the YouTube star who created it. I'm Saul Hansel.
And I'm Steve Rosenbaum, and this is Hacking TV.
It is Hacking TV, and we have been talking about over-the-top cable and all its incarnations since we started this a year and a half ago. And now the biggest video provider in the country, AT&T DirecTV, is saying, you don't need a satellite dish. You don't need a wire from our central office. Just get your CNN and ESPN over the internet for $35 a month. Will anybody care?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a sexy offering, right? I mean, if you don't read the fine print, you might sign up.
And they're spending, they've got oodles of cash they're making from all of us who have cell phones with them. So they'll give you a free Apple TV if you just prepay for 3 months. So that's, like getting the video service for free. They're charging only $5 extra for HBO compared to $15 a la carte. So there's some interesting options there.
But do keep in mind, the fine print that got me is it's not $35 a year. It's
$6 a month.
It's $60 a month with a 1 year rebate. The first year is $35 a month, but then it bounces up to $60.
Okay, so I missed that part. I know that they had two tiers, a $35 tier and a $65 tier that you could get, I guess, on a 1 year for the low price. But I mean, their competition. Well, Sling is interesting from, the other satellite provider, EchoStar Dish, has a tier that starts at $20, and so they're really going in for the skinny bundle. PlayStation's the other major competitor with a slightly bigger bundle at $40, but it's going to be interesting the trade-offs they come up with for what is the right price point, and do people really want enough of those channels to pay for the bigger bundles?
So in the cable will screw you category, when before Time Warner Cable in New York changed over to Spectrum, I called them and said, hey, tell me what the deal is. And the woman was very nice and said, listen, we're going to change over our pricing in 2 weeks. And because I was complaining because I'm paying $5 a month for my modem, which I don't want. And she said, don't worry, with the new deal, they're not going to charge for that anymore. And I said, really? That's great. And she said, oh, no, it's a whole new thing. Fine. So I actually wrote about it and wrote about these new. So 2 weeks comes along. She said, just call back and tell them you don't want to pay for your modem anymore in 2 weeks, and they'll just take it off your bill. So I called back in 2 weeks, and I said, hey, I'm calling back in 2 weeks to say take this off. They said, oh, no, in order to get that taken off your bill, you have to upgrade to the Spectrum service. And given the deal that you currently have, it would actually be $20 a month more for slower internet access.
Oh.
But don't worry, we'll take the $5 off. So instead of it being $25 more for slower internet access, it'll only be $20 more for slower internet access. Or you can just keep your grandfathered plan you have now and pay for the cable modem.
Right, but until they change something else, right?
So I guess that was why the $35 1 year, sample rate caught my eye, because it's like everybody's going to have an entry level price to get you in the door. But once they've moved you over to OTT, I just think net no one's saving any money on anything.
Well, yes. Here's the only factor on that, right? So you've got more competition. So all other things being equal, Adam Smith told us, and he's right, that increased supply, same amount of demand, price goes down. So Sling is going to, have an effect on the market. People will be able to switch more. We've got a bunch more people coming in. We'll talk a little bit about Hulu. We've got, I expect by a year from now, Comcast for sure will have a nationwide over-the-top offering. And, Apple may well, Google is going to. So you're going to see a lot of people trying to package stuff different ways.
So if I sign up for DirecTV Now, I get my free $99 Apple TV. I cancel it in 3 months. Am I essentially paying nothing for the Apple TV? Is that the idea?
Yeah. And it will be interesting to see what kind of contracts they try and lock people into. There isn't a good reason to have contracts. Contracts make sense if there's like a big upfront capital investment, like they're paying for a phone or they're running a wire to your house or something like that, or giving you some, a bunch of money up front in a gift card. But this is a market, Netflix doesn't have contracts. Regular Hulu doesn't have contracts. So there, you'll see how much people get locked in.
So what is it when Business Insider says that AT&T has been, plagued by technical problems? What does that mean?
Well, I think that, the problem that the live streaming has, it's a little bit different than on-demand streaming. Is if everybody is streaming the same thing at the same time. You're watching, Game of Thrones on HBO as it's happening, that sort of extra strain on the system. So people who've been testing out the Sling product say that the quality degrades at peak moments. And apparently Twitter has been all filled with complaints that, in the first couple of days, that the quality, that AT&T, for all its vastness, couldn't actually keep up with serving the product. I don't think that's a long-term issue, but I know 10 years ago, there was a big debate about whether you could actually do cable over the internet, and the nation's bandwidth was big enough to have everybody, with a stream of the Super Bowl, right?
What about if they do it like gas rationing? If your cable bill ends in an even number, you can watch Game of Thrones live. But if it ends in an odd number, you have to wait an hour before you turn it on.
And how much less would you pay on your bill for that?
It's just an hour. Yeah. Come on.
Okay. It's like the big news in the airline business is United will say if you buy the cheapest tickets, you're not allowed to use the overhead rack. You just can use under your seat.
How are they policing that, by the way?
They are policing that by saying you also only get middle seats, and you can't sit next to your family, and you go on last. So everybody else goes on, fills up the overheads, and then the people who paid the super discount fares go on, and they hit you with a taser if you have anything bigger than a handbag. And
that's, because customer service really couldn't get any worse.
And yeah.
But back to over the top, where at least we have some potential upside. So net, we're saying this AT&T thing is a good thing, or
here's what's going to happen. So yes, it is a good thing because it creates competition. It's a good thing because an internet-based bundle ultimately will be more open to more kinds of players than the traditional cable architecture, which is sort of capped at 500 channels or thereabouts. If it's internet, they could go pay, for the Hacking TV channel and put it into some bundle and give us a little bit of subscription revenue on some basis or another. We still have to be worth their thinking about, but they're not allocating finite space. But there's a lot to be, and again, let's skip for a second because I think it's interesting to the economics. So Moffett-Nathanson went through and said, well, what happens when somebody switches from Comcast bundle to paying for Comcast for their internet connection, but getting their video from AT&T. So here's a couple things. So technically, the video bundle the average video bundle price on Comcast is a lovely $87 a month. But so you're saying good riddance to that, and that's a lot of pain for them. But they don't have to pay for stuff like programming and customer service. And if you buy the bundle, you are getting like a $28 bundle discount. $25 bundle discount because they packaged them together. And Moffett-Nathanson says on top of that, if you're going to go over the top, you're likely as not to upgrade to a faster tier of the internet. So if half the people pay an extra $15 to buy the next highest internet thing, Comcast is only out $5.50 a month per customer. And I don't know if people
strikes me as still a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. That's $60 a year times, a third of the country or something like that. Moreover, when you look at it, what's the consumer getting? So the consumer is basically not paying Comcast $50 because they canceled $87 worth of video, but they lost the $25 bundle discount. So their cable bill goes down by $50, and then it might go up by $15 because they're getting the faster package. So they're down $35. Maybe they're ahead if they get the $20 Sling package, but they're probably not ahead. They're getting a lot fewer channels for not saving very much money, right?
If I seem like I've tuned out a little bit, it's just because the math is so frickin' depressing. It's like they've got all these new levers they can pull, and one way or another, they are going to get the money from the consumer, right? There's no version of this story that says the consumer benefits, and there's going to be. I mean, I know you were saying earlier, more competition, so it drives price down, but I don't see that happening.
The people who lose most are people who like to watch, Animal Planet and ESPN3. Turner actually, I just saw this, did a study where they said that in a skinny bundle world, the things that people are not going to pay for are channels people don't watch very often and don't watch very much. And they said the media businesses are getting about $6 billion of fees on these channels that nobody cares about. Those are going to go away. The media companies, the Turners and the Disneys of the world just aren't going to be able to make ESPN 47 anymore.
And my theory is they become much higher quality narrowcast channels. They do subscribers. All right, so meanwhile, you pulled this FCC story out of the air. I was surprised that it was interesting in part because I thought the FCC had all shut off the lights and gone home.
Well, they shut off the lights for new things, but they still can write nasty letters about their existing policies. And so Wheeler has written a nasty letter both to AT&T and Verizon saying your plan to take advantage of your cell phone business is not cool, right? So the idea is if you're watching DirecTV on your AT&T cell phone or anything Verizon does, Go 90, et cetera, on your Verizon cell phone, you're not paying data, which costs a fortune. And they're saying that is not sufficiently open and neutral and, shame.
If you were a mid-tier lawyer at either AT&T or Verizon, would you even open that letter if you saw the return address was Tom Wheeler? Or you just put it right in the shredder?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The issue won't go away, but how seriously the issue is taken over the next 4 years, wouldn't bet very much on.
Look, part of the problem with trying to read tea leaves on the Trump administration is, there's nobody from the tech community, short of Peter Thiel, that has any role any seat at the table. I mean, they literally have been boxed out. And so the question is, does telecom show up as big business, we should take care of them, or does it show up as technology, we should throw them under the bus? And I mean, that's a coin toss at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's one of the falls in the category of most Trump questions, which is which Trump and who in the administration are we listening to? The Trump that didn't like the AT&T Time Warner merger just because he doesn't like concentration of power, or the Trump that is appointing Wilbur Ross and the Goldman Sachs Alumni Club to run his administration?
And then on top of that, the fact of the matter is, there's actual deep-seated, not going to go away animosity between Trump and Comcast NBC.
Yeah, although we'll see. If he ends up appointing Romney as Secretary of State, that's probably good for, it's a sign of, forgiving grudges if he does, but.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing the Comcast guys crawling on ground glass and, humiliating themselves in the way that Romney is.
Yeah. Tough life having to eat those frog legs at Jean Georges. It's such humiliation.
Honestly, that must have been one of the most distasteful meals the whole thing just made my skin crawl. So, but back to this FCC thing. So here's which brings us to the conversation that I think also, speaking of people that had kind of a complicated week.
Yes.
There were 3 or 4 little Netflix stories.
Yeah.
Each of them independently probably not that interesting, but I would argue that if you knit them all together, it was actually kind of a tricky week for Netflix. On one hand, they announced big news, you can download your shows so that you don't have to be online to watch Netflix, which, by the way, customers have been, ever since Amazon started offering that, which is now 9 months ago or so, Netflix has been a little behind the 8 ball to get that done.
And Netflix, versions of that product have been offered for a decade, and Netflix has done just fine, but why not? Right?
Yeah.
If you could,
and I'm sure there were licensing issues and contracts that had to get refixed and all that. But that got announced with a bunch of hoo-ha, and then buried in that announcement was, our friend Neil Hunt saying, oh, and by the way, we no longer have any infrastructure. We've moved all of our servers to Amazon.
So think about this. This is an internet company with, 80 million customers that, accounts for the single largest amount of bandwidth coursing across the internet, has how many data centers? 0. Yeah. It does not own server computers. That is an amazing proposition.
And Amazon. And
who owns? Yeah, go ahead.
Unlike Donald Trump, who will ban you from his hotel if he doesn't like you, or if if you're mean to him, as he says. Amazon has actually been really good about keeping its retail business and its wholesale internet services business separated enough that there's never a sense that they're playing fast and loose with the data that they have. That being said, though, I mean, you have to ask yourself, are Amazon and Netflix actually head-on competitors?
Yes. In parts of their business. I mean, you don't, buy...
So if Walmart announced tomorrow that they were shutting down all their servers and all their warehouses and moving their entire operation to Amazon, would you short the Walmart stock? I think you would.
No, I would not. Look, remember, Amazon has pioneered a, co-opetition model. It's complicated, but there's lots of people on Amazon selling stuff off of its merchandise pages. Now, some of them will say that Amazon uses data and, drives a hard bargain, but there's a lot of them still there. Who would I bet on more, Walmart or Netflix? I've said this a bunch. I think Reed Hastings is one of the smartest people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, and I've got to believe that they, there aren't any problems with this deal that we can think of that they haven't talked through. Maybe, what's the big downside? less about data because, I mean, Netflix publishes the numbers of how big they are, and they may be able to encrypt certain things. It, maybe that because of their size, they have funded Amazon's expansion, right? I mean, I don't know what % of the servers that AWS has are devoted to Netflix, but it's not a trivial number just because of how huge it is.
So do you think there's some super fat legal document the size of a phone book about how they can't read data and they can't share data and they can't use data? And
yes. And and at the
big phone book.
Well, what would you, I mean, I suppose, I guess if I were Jeff, the thing I'd want to, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, what would I want to know about Netflix that I can't figure out easily? Ratings per show, probably. Although I have Alexa, which still, sneaks data from all kinds of places, so I might know that anyway. But you could get better data per show. And that would help me, Jeff, invest in content that competes. But how much would that cost Netflix to lose? If Jeff, if Netflix is saving $1 billion a year on infrastructure, would Jeff's use of that data cause $1 billion of damage to Netflix? I tend to think secrets are overvalued myself, but
so at the same time, little announcement: Netflix and TiVo. There's going to be a Netflix button on your TiVo device. I know you think TiVo's old. By the way, having said that, though, the thing that I found most interesting of the 3 or 4 Netflix bits of news was Ted Sarandos still coming out for net neutrality.
Of course.
Hard for me to understand what his negotiating leverage is in that. I mean,
he's a popular brand, but he does, does Netflix have the combined, the clout that AT&T and Verizon have in Washington, particularly in this administration? Probably not, but that doesn't mean you don't say what you want.
Yeah, but in real life, what does he gain by putting, his hand on the scale on that side, given where things seem like they're going? I mean, what?
Just now looks like he's backing down.
So net neutrality gets repealed. That hits Netflix hard. They have to do what? They have to raise their prices?
Well, it depends on how it's repealed, right? And, Netflix is both the biggest beneficiary, and yet it's also the most insulated because it has so much clout, right? They own infrastructure. Netflix runs its own network and has its own, or, has Amazon run it for them. They have hardware in most head ends, the little box in your neighborhood that the internet goes through that does stuff. So they have such a scale that they can bargain hard. And they're also, we talked about it on the show, they're basically saying, we'll be like HBO and you can market us to your Comcast customers and, sell us at a profit. And if you do that, obviously, you have to be nice to us in other ways. So it's not good for them, but I think they'll be okay. When you and I take Hacking TV to the next level and we're the only ones that people have to pay data for to get on their cell phones, it might be harder for us.
All right. So, and then there was this odd story that kind of got tucked into the news. CNN writing what I thought was a pretty big check for an app that I don't want to say no one's ever heard of, but
no one's ever heard
of it. So, first of all, Casey Neistat.
Tell us about Casey.
He's a big YouTuber.
Okay.
In the big, make a big deal YouTuber category, I'd say, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I'd say he's in the top 10. He's New York based. He's very flamboyant. He's funny. He's in your face. He does wild things with cameras. He has drone video he really puts it out there. And the question is, did CNN buy his app, which is called Beam? Beam.
Mm-hmm.
Because they need the technology, or really is it a super expensive talent acquisition? That's the question.
Well, and the deal also said that they're going to form a joint venture to produce new stuff. So I'm inclined to see this as, he's sort of an extreme video personality. Think of this as a Jeff Zucker, Anthony Bourdain type thing to get the content. And I happen to know Matt Hackett a little bit, the head engineer there, who's a very good video engineer with some news background. And so, is it worth $25 million for the pair of them? I don't know. But is there, who knows?
We could have bid.
We will be. I mean, we're not going to talk about all the phone calls that we've gotten. I mean, particularly since you had, eye candy Bernie Gortzman on the show last week while I was away. There's our download count doubled last week.
By the way, Bernie is an entertaining character indeed. Did you see the pictures he took of Donald Trump having dinner?
I did not. Was he in Jean Georges that day?
He was in Jean Georges that night. Those were his pictures. But back to the CNN thing. So, I have trouble believing that they couldn't at least convince themselves that Beam. So Beam is a app that lets people produce 4-second video clips.
Right.
I wonder how many users they have.
It looks like they've got 4,000 reviews on the App Store. That's more than a lot of places do. And now the App Store doesn't say why people like it, but let me. This is now my favorite social media forum. I felt compelled to let the Beam makers know they did a good job with a new layout. I love I can capture moments of my day life while actually living the enjoyment. The basic deal is they've got a technology that uses the selfie camera to know when you've put the phone on your chest. So you have something that's like a chest eye view for 4 seconds.
So
somebody wants that.
So it's like Snap Spectacles minus the
Spectacles.
The spectacles.
Minus all the time you'd ever want over 4 seconds.
By the way, I just want to say for all of our listeners that are out there, if you have an extra pair of Snap Spectacles and you want to sell them to me, I want to buy a pair. Even though I wear glasses and they wouldn't really fit on, I just want to play with them.
To go next to your now totally useless Google Glass? Does it do anything anymore? Or are they
kidding? It's a collector's item. It's going to go in a museum.
Ah, okay.
I've sealed
mine. It doesn't do anything.
I've hermetically sealed mine in plastic so that they won't age.
My favorite collector's item is my pets.com t-shirt and hat. Because pets can't drive.
All right,
anyway.
So we have just a few minutes left. I think we need to at least just touch on this weird YouTube thing because,
which weird YouTube thing are we talking about now?
So no one's quite put all the pieces together, but if you look under the hood, the lawyer who essentially sued and got Gawker shut down is now aligned with an as of yet unfiled but threatened Trump lawsuit against a video maker. And I think I think that there's always been this question whenever Trump goes after the media and goes after journalists about whether or not that's just bluster, whether or not he's actually going to really kind of try and make changes so people can't write mean things about him. And, I think that there's now some evidence, at least some initial evidence, that maybe he's really going to do that. And
I guess there was a video that said Barron Trump, the youngest kid, the Melania's kid, had autism.
Right.
And after that threat went out, the video maker pulled it down and stuck up an apology.
Yep.
Whether Google was involved in that or not, we don't know. It's a bad sign. Even if they don't file the lawsuit, it is, the president and the president's family should not be running around threatening lawsuits.
No.
Then again, people shouldn't be committing libel. And if you knew, I don't have no idea what Barron is like, but if the person who put that up knowingly said something that wasn't true, they probably shouldn't do that. But then again, Donald Trump shouldn't have knowingly said that, Barack Obama was born in Kenya either.
So I watched the video and I thought it was compelling and interesting and well made and not meant to be exploited. You could argue whether or not the children of famous people should be covered in any way, shape, or form, but there was nothing about it that was it was not a hatchet job.
What did they say about the connection between Barron and autism? If it was, did they have facts?
They literally took series of videos of him in public and tied it to behavior that had to do with the way people were looking him in the eye or not looking him in the eye, the way people were touching him or not touching him. And there were absolutely some, and again, I'm not an expert, but there were behaviors that made you think, yeah, that makes some sense.
And why were they doing this? What?
Because Barron Trump is covered a lot in social media. There's all kinds of discussions about, is he a robot? Is he a real? There's a whole series of memes about him.
Right, but if you were going to, do you think this was tongue-in-cheek? If you were going to write a video about whether or not he was a robot, I would say that either you're stupid or that's tongue-in-cheek.
No, this was not tongue-in-cheek. This was meant to be a real thesis. In any case, we are out of time, so we'll return to the question about free speech in many times in coming weeks, because I think it's going to become a major issue.
That's not going to be a question. Everything's going to be perfect starting January 20th. Didn't you hear? And who needs free speech when we have such strong leaders doing the right things and making America great? Everything will be fine. Yeah. Everything is good.
Have you tried to book a train to Washington yet?
Why would I need to go to Washington? The people there will take care of us.
It's all solid. All right. Hack away. Have a good week, and see you again next week. Hack on.
Keep on hacking.